Lady Shadow 79 asked about holding back when using more expensive materials. Lady Shadow, this one's for you. What's up friends, how's everyone doing? I hope you're doing fantastic. In this video I want to address a topic that many of you may have thought about, maybe experienced. So usually when you start with a new medium, like for me with watercolor, you kind of get the cheaper materials or like the medium level materials. Some people go straight for the top, but for most of us I think it's just a really good, oops, something fell, just a really good approach to start cheap. And I also have another video on starting cheap. I'll put a link in the description box below. But anyway, once you do decide to make the change and use more expensive materials, you're kind of in the middle because you have your old equipment, your old tools that are cheaper, and now you have the new ones. And I can totally relate to the question asked because when I want to use the more expensive materials, I find myself sometimes, now it happens less, but I found myself holding back more and sort of just being cheap with them, you know, just feeling like I don't want to, you know, waste all that good paper, or especially if I'm just doing like exercises or stuff like that, I'm just practicing, or maybe I don't want to waste that really good tube of paint. So this video is meant to address that question. I'm going to divide it into two parts. So the first one is going to be the more mindset related advice, and the second one is going to be the more practical advice. This is really from my personal experience. It's something that the way I feel that I deal with this. Many people will have different solutions for that, so just generally speaking, if you have a different approach or something you want to share, feel free to drop a comment below. So let's now start with the more mindset side of things. So the one thing I think is really important to understand, and I also have everything written down here, is that when you use better materials, you need to kind of understand that you will probably improve a little quicker. Now, it's not necessarily true for all mediums, for all different artistic fields, but from what I can see from watercolor, just using better material means you have less stuff working against you and everything working more for you. So your paper is just more receptive of the paint. Your paints are more vibrant, more strong, which is, by the way, an interesting thing, because if you buy better paints, they're usually more vibrant, meaning you need to mix less of them, meaning they last longer. Just a side point. But anyway, when you will probably just improve faster because you're using materials that are better. I really experienced this when I made a switch from the old Cotman paper I was using to the newer Arch paper. This was the most significant change for me. With the old tubes, the Cotman tubes and the Van Gogh palette that I had, which I have right here. And when I switched from that to Daniel Smith, it was less of a difference. I think the paper was more critical for me. Another thing that was really critical for me was changing the brushes to better ones. So you gotta sort of play around with and understand the field in which you are, and I will touch upon that point a little later on. Okay, so just for now, understand you'll probably improve faster. Now, when you improve faster, this is the second point, you'll probably also make better art with better materials. And I know if an artist is really good and really proficient at their craft, they'll make good artwork no matter what, even if they use really cheap materials that are kind of working against them. But they will all admit that if they're using the best materials out there, they will just make better art. Okay, and it's just something that you want, you know, it's hard enough to just improve in watercolor, so using something that also is working with you and really helping you and just making it the easiest on yourself is, I think, really important. Now this brings me to my third point in the mindset realm, which is making better art opens just more doors for you, and you can start thinking about monetizing it and start to sell it at a very basic level. You know, right now I'm aspiring to make my full income and to actually make all the money I make just from my art, not necessarily from selling my art, but from talking about my knowledge and sharing it with people and just giving people the motivation and even the entertainment aspect of my videos and my content in general. But many people just make art for fun. But if you do make good paintings, why not consider selling them if you are not interested in just keeping all of them, which I know some people are. But if you do have that sort of side to you that wants to kind of even feel just the validation of selling your work, if you produce better art, go ahead, sell it, and this can really cover all your expenses like that. Because to be honest, you know, a lot of people say that art material is really expensive, but there are things that are far more expensive out there. And if you're smart about it, which we will talk about in a moment, you'll see how you can get things for much cheaper than you would think. And so if you start selling paintings, and even if you sell like one painting a month, and you charge like a normal price for it, I don't know, I don't even want to throw a price out there, but like you can really pay back for many of the things you're making. So just a point to have in mind. I know not everyone wants to sell their art, it's perfectly fine, but if you do consider that, even just one sale every once in a while can really cover up many of your expenses. Okay, so I don't want to get too much into the financial side of things because I know everyone comes from a different background. Some people have more, some people have less. And I do think it's important to stay within your zone, at least in the beginning, and really not to burden yourself with expenses. So anyway, this is it for the mindset side of things. Now let's talk about some practical tips on just making it easier not to waste more expensive material and sort of ease your mind when you do use more expensive materials, okay? So the first thing I would suggest is to educate yourself on your specific field. Now, you may be a watercolor painter or someone who's into sketching or drawing or any other type of art. You want to educate yourself on the little nuances that can help you save money. So if I give an example from the watercolor world, tubes are generally cheaper than pens. Now, I know it may sound a bit strange to some people maybe, but actually if you buy a tube, a large one, you can fill up maybe 3 or 4 half pens with it, and it's just more cost effective than if you would pay for the pen itself. Now granted, a single tube is relatively more expensive than a pen set. So this brings me to another example. Sets are usually cheaper than singles. So if you buy a 3-tube set, and I reviewed 2 of these because I think it's really cost effective. So if you buy a 3 set or even a 6 or 8 or 24 tube set, you can save a lot of money. So just you want to sort of be able to really understand how you can make it cheaper for yourself, okay? So this is one thing I wanted to just give as an example. Another advice I really want to share is if you made a switch like I previewed and alluded to in the beginning of the video, if you made a switch from medium to more expensive equipment, you will probably find yourself somewhere in the middle. You have both your cheaper ones and the more expensive ones. So the next advice is to delegate everything possible to the cheaper ones. Meaning, if you do an exercise that doesn't require you use your best paper, do it on the cheaper paper. If you are just practicing, or if you want to use a sketch paper, a test paper just to check out how the paint turns out before you apply it to your painting, you know, use your cheaper paper, use your cheaper paints, use like whatever you can, delegate everything you can to the cheaper tools, and then use the more expensive ones either to create art that is meant to be more finalized, more like larger pieces, maybe pieces you really want to devote a lot of attention to. Maybe you want to make a gift for a friend and you want it to be really high quality. You know, everyone has their own things to take into consideration, but if you can, delegate to the cheaper stuff, to the medium level, to the low level even, and just use the more expensive stuff for the bare necessities, okay? If you really want to make, or if you want to start selling, like I said, you know, you probably should use more expensive materials in many of the cases. There are 2 more practical advice I want to give you, and they may relate a little more to watercolor or maybe painting in general, but you know, you can, I think, apply them to any field. So the first one is to use, let's say you made a painting that was a failure or whatever, you feel like it's a failed painting, or if you did an exercise like this one, you can use the back of the paper as test paper or just to make another painting. You know, you just gotta be smart about it. So that's a small tactical tip for those who are interested more in painting, drawing, things like that. So this is the first one. Now, another tactical advice that I would give you is to use the paints that are left over in your palette. They are just great for, especially if you had a large painting earlier, they're wonderful to create grays because you have so much, like a little of every paint. And so when you mix them all together, just wet them all together and, you know, don't clean it off just like that. Maybe you can use it to create gray. Maybe you can, if gray is not good for any of your paintings, you can use that gray to make a similar exercise like this one. So you kind of gotta be smart and pull from here and there and understand how you can save up more of the materials. For example, what I use the paint on my palette for is to just make gray skies. If I want to make like a moody painting or rainy day, rainy street, something like that, I usually use quite a lot of grays. So this is really good, and you can just add in a bit of blues, a bit of burnt sienna to play around with how warm or cool it is, but you don't have to just waste it all away, you know. And another advice I just thought about now is if you have something that you're using many times, for example brushes or the water bucket that's full of water right now, I was gonna just pick it up aggressively, but things like this, you want to just take good care of them. So I wash my brushes every time after I paint. I go and brush them, I empty the bucket, I make sure to keep everything in top condition because brushes that are kept well can last for many years, and then you just need to buy less of them. So this is another thing you can think of, whatever it is. If you're using a fountain pen or a pen with a replaceable cartridge for ink, if you keep the pen in good condition, you don't have to replace it. Okay, so this is just another thought I want to throw out there. So anyway, I hope this all makes sense to you. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned maybe how to waste less materials, how to more efficiently ration your work between the more expensive and the more medium level. A lot of these tips are really intuitive, and maybe it may seem obvious to some of you, but if someone, even one person, gets a new idea out of it, it makes me happy. And again, it's just from my personal experience, so it's things that many of you may have experienced as well in the past. So anyway, this is it. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the love and support you leave in the comments and anywhere else, and like emails I get. Thank you so much. I will see you again in another video really soon. Take care.